Welcome to episode 6 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore. I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. If you're new to the show, we would really appreciate it if you subscribe. It would really help us out as we continue to make some great Leafs and NHL content. So, as of Sunday, February 14th, 2021, Valentine's Day, the Toronto Maple Leafs are still in first place in the NHL standings with 23 points. Technically, they're fourth in points percentage, so we have to look at that as well. But at the end of the day, they're 11-3-1 after 15 games. They're first in the Canadian division, 3 points ahead of the Montreal Canadiens. We will get into the week that was and give you our thoughts and opinions on everything that went down with the Leafs. But first, it is time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Happy Valentine's Day, Bruno. Like you said, Leafs.
Thank you, Lepore. I'm feeling good. Are you
feeling
good?
What do you have planned for Mrs. Bruno here today?
Well, she loves her sweets. Okay. So she loves a sugar fix. So that's what she's getting today. You know, some nice little cupcakes.
So did you make them?
What's that?
Did you make them or they're store-bought?
No, I absolutely did not make the cupcakes.
Probably better that way.
Yeah. So picked her up some cupcakes. So yeah, pretty excited about that. I'm sure she's gonna like that. She loves her sugar. How about you? Anything planned for Valentine's Day?
Yeah, we got the plane coming. It's gonna pick us up. We're gonna go to Paris. I thought we'd chop her around the Eiffel Tower and drink some red wine while we chop her around a beautiful city. But no, I think we're like you, gonna eat some chocolate and then maybe a grocery store run. And then a romantic takeout dinner, maybe some Popeyes or Mickey D's while we sit around and watch The Office. But hey,
so not quite Paris.
Yeah, those are the life goals. That's the when we get our 10 millionth subscriber, that's how we'll celebrate the chopper ride around Paris.
We're getting there, Lepore. Yeah. We're getting there.
Slowly but
surely.
Cross
the 100 barrier.
Yes.
On our way to a milli. Let's do this.
Let's do it.
All right, everybody. So let's get into the week that was for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So just giving you a brief rundown of what went down on Monday. The Leafs beat the Canucks 3-1. The Leafs were outshot 27-7 in the first two periods against the Canucks.
Brutal.
But then they woke up in the third. They scored 2 goals, 11 seconds apart. Matthews had the game winner, his league leading 11th of the season. So all in all, even though it was a disappointing start, the Leafs were able to pull out a victory. And then the 2 big games of the week against the Montreal Canadiens. So first on Wednesday, the Leafs beat the Habs 4-2. Travis Dermott, Justin Hall, and Ilya Mikheyev all scored their first goals of the season. And of course, a game against Carey Price. The Leafs were outshot in this game, but it was kind of deceiving because the Leafs did seem to have a lot more quality scoring chances and did a really good job keeping the Habs from the middle of the ice and denying them some high danger scoring chances. So all in all, it was a good statement win, in a matchup between the 2 top teams in the division. And then the Leafs ended off the week in disappointing fashion, losing 2-1 to the Montreal Canadiens on home ice. It was the Leafs' first regulation loss since January 20th. A span of 10 games. So it was a nice run for the Leafs, right? I mean, you think they'd have to regress a little bit after that, insane start they were on. But yeah, I mean, the Leafs dominated the first period. The Habs kind of woke up in the third and really took it to the Leafs, and Brendan Gallagher made a really nice play on the game winner.
Yeah.
And just a quick little quote actually from Sheldon Keefe after the game. He said, "We had more than enough offense there in the first to blow this game wide open and didn't capitalize. It didn't go our way. And then our game was a mess from there." So Sheldon Keefe obviously would like to see his team play a little bit better than they did on Saturday night. So Lepore, what are your overall thoughts on what you saw from the Leafs this week?
We'll start with the Canucks game. I think there are some games when your favorite team plays poorly, you're kind of okay with it. I look at that game against the Canucks, and it was our third game against them in a row. We had won the 2 previous, so you kind of expect a letdown on the side of the Leafs, and you expect the Vancouver Canucks to come out guns a-blazing. And they did, like you said, heavily outshot. In the first period, the shots were 13-4. In the second, 14-3. So that's bad, man. Like that's really, really bad. So they come out with the win, the Leafs do. And it's twofold, right? Because like I said, there's part of you that says, well, you're not, even the bad teams, you're not going to outplay them every time. But then you kind of look at it in a positive way and say, heck, even when we play bad, we still win. And we were still able to beat this team 3 games in a row. I do not like to see the Leafs get outshot 32-19 to a team that's near the bottom of the standings in the NHL. That's something that really jumps out at me. Really, really jumps out at me. And with a team like the Leafs, with the guys they have in the lineup, with the guys at the top of their lineup getting paid the way they're getting paid, I don't want to see games where they put less than 20 shots on the net. Now, we can look at the deeper metrics and see if they were missing the net a lot, shots getting blocked. But still, I mean, you're getting paid that kind of money. A 19-shot game against a bad team like Vancouver is not acceptable. And it shouldn't be acceptable from the coaching staff or the fans. But again, they get the win. So you naturally kind of push it to the side and say, let's move on. But I'm sure Keefe and the staff are circling to that game as something that's concern. And kind of hoping maybe it would kind of be like a springboard game going into the 2 games against Montreal. And even though they won, it wasn't. But what was your overall take from the game against the Canucks?
Yeah, those first 2 periods were a disaster. I mean, when you get outshot
man.
by 20 over the first couple of periods, I mean, you probably deserve to lose that game. So all in all, I mean, I guess it's a positive considering that the Leafs were able to hang around and then, you know, that quick attack in the third, Matthews and Kerfoot scoring 11 seconds apart. And that's always going to be a weapon that this team has. And listen, I know they have been struggling a little bit just in terms of shot generation and 5-on-5 scoring, but this is a team that we know going over the last few years where they can hit you at any moment with the talent they have, right? So it was just one of those games where it's like, okay, we didn't play our best, but at the end of the day, you know, when we needed to step up in the third period and score a couple quick goals, we did. And Matthews obviously came through, scoring the game winner, his league leading 11th of the season. But when I think about the Vancouver Canucks, like, it's crazy how we labeled Ottawa obviously as the worst team in this division. And now the Canucks, I know they just beat Calgary on Saturday night to snap their 6-game losing streak, but
yeah, good for them.
It's almost like we're putting them in the same bucket now, where it's like, if you don't beat this Canucks team, you know, let's say you're playing them 3 in a row. It's like, if you don't beat them 2 out of 3, that's a disappointment at this point.
Oh yeah.
And I know the Canucks have talent. I know they have Pedersen and Besser and Horvat, and Quinn Hughes has been great this year, but that team is just discombobulated right now. I mean, they're just defensively, they've been a mess. Their goaltending hasn't been good. So yeah, that's a team that you have to beat. And yeah, would I have liked to see, you know, a more dominant performance from the Leafs in that game? Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, they got the 2 points, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, Lepore, there's really nothing else from that game that stood out. So
what a shot by Matthews, man. He's got to let that slap shot. I love that slap shot he does, man.
Oh yeah, but that quick release, and it's just great how he can just unload from literally anywhere, any angle at any moment. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So that was awesome to see. But yeah, I mean, other than that Canucks game, whatever. The Leafs got their 2 points, moved on. We got to talk about the next 2 games of the week here, Lepore.
Yeah.
Massive showdown against the Montreal Canadiens, a team that Sportsnet's Chris Johnston called a juggernaut.
Remember?
A couple of weeks ago. I wouldn't call the Montreal Canadiens a juggernaut at the moment, even though they just beat the Leafs on Saturday night. But let's start with that first game, Lepore. Okay, I thought that was a big statement game from the Leafs. I thought they dominated most of the game in that 4-2 win. I thought the shots were pretty deceiving, like I mentioned a little earlier in the show. It was just one of those things where the Habs were getting all of their shot attempts from the outside. they weren't generating anything in the slot. It didn't seem like they were able to string together, a lot of high danger scoring chances. I thought the Leafs did a fantastic job keeping them to the outside. And there was this very awesome quote actually from Sheldon Keefe after the game, after the first game against the Habs. He said, "We didn't give them very much at all. In fact, I had this as the lowest number of scoring chances we gave up in a game all season."
Yeah,
so
I saw
Lepore,
that.
your thoughts on what you saw from that first game against the Habs?
I saw some, we joked around that the world was going to explode after the results of this game crowning a North Division champion in February. And of course, it was a split. So now we have nothing to talk about, and we're still just arguing. But not that we wouldn't have been arguing had one team won both. But it was a weird game, I think, to be honest. You had that early goal on Freddie that he's got to stop. He's got to stop that. And of course, it had to be Josh Anderson, the guy we were saying, I think it was the last show, saying how his shooting percentage is off the rocker, comes in the right wing, just slides it in. It's like perfect, great. Scores a weak one just to boost that shooting percentage even more. But yeah, I'm with you in the way that it seemed like the Leafs were able to keep the Habs from the off to the outside. And one thing that I don't know if it was done on purpose, it seemed like the Leafs D, when Montreal would come into the zone, I don't know if it was a lack of respect thing or it was a respect thing in the way that they would just kind of float back. And I noticed it a lot with the Hole and Muzzin pairing, but they would just float back and kind of allow them to come wide and fire something on net. Now, whether that's a scouting thing, thinking they know that that's how they're going to try to attack the net, or they're just saying, bring it on and try to beat us, or they're giving a lot of confidence in Freddie, saying you're not going to beat him from there. I don't know. But the game itself, it was weird. I mean, at the end of the day, a weak goal on Freddie. Then you have Dermott scoring his first goal in 100 years. Justin Holl with a goal that came off just a drop of the puck from Tavares, no real crazy scoring chance. That one was kind of an odd one too, in the way that Montreal almost kind of let him shoot. One of the commentators said that Price was kind of caught off guard, and it maybe was because he thought one of his players was going to block it and then kind of moved out of the way.
Yeah, he had so much time.
Yeah, it was
just that shot.
Yeah, it was like an NHL 95 type thing, in the way that you just have all the time in the world to move into the slot and blast it. And then the third one, again, Toronto comes in the zone with speed. Kerfoot fanned on a shot, and it went over to Mikheyev for an empty net. One thing that Montreal scored late, then we got an empty netter. But one thing I will say about this game, and collectively about the two games that I didn't necessarily like from a Leafs fan perspective, is that if we are to play the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs, and I think we would all say that looks pretty likely as we sit here today, these are the types of games they're going to want. They're going to want low scoring games. They're going to want low chance games. In that second game, was there one penalty given? I know the refs totally put the whistle away,
but I think it may have been one or two penalties the entire game. Yeah,
so that's what Montreal is going to want. They're going to want something very low chance to keep the scores down, because I think a lot of if we're told that in a 7-game series, if most of the games are going to be track meets, Toronto's going to win. But if it's that slower pace, that more patient game, that's where the Canadiens are going to have a real shot. So it's interesting to see how Toronto is going to approach the next games against Montreal, because that first game was that crazy track meet that, the Leafs fans, I think, kind of want and hope for to see a win. And then we have these games that just passed in the way they were slower. So I'm intrigued to see how Keefe and the staff are going to approach the next game, if they're going to try to open it up, or it's something that, they can even control, because maybe Julian's really good at just slowing the game down, or maybe it's completely out of their hands because, penalties create a lot of momentum, even if you don't score. And if the referees put the whistles away, they put the whistles away. But we'll see. It's going to be fun to see how the games against Montreal unfold, both in the way of a result standpoint and in the way of a sort of pace and flow standpoint. Because I think against a lot of teams, we know what we're going to get. And with Montreal, I fear that if it is going to be that slower pace, that's not something that benefits Toronto very well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, especially what you said about the playoffs and how, yeah, it looks like at this point, the Leafs are going to play the Habs at some point in the playoffs, whether that's the first round or the second round, that remains to be seen. But I think about the qualifying round against Columbus,
Ugh.
and I've talked about this on previous shows, and I just think about the way that the Blue Jackets were able to beat the Leafs in that series. And you ask anyone who watched that series, you go look at the advanced numbers, the Leafs controlled the play in that series the majority of the time. They were the better team. They had more shot attempts. They controlled possession. But I think that's sort of the way that Montreal is going to look at beating this team. And I think we saw that in the third game of the week when they beat the Leafs 2-1 on Saturday night. It reminded me of that Columbus series where it's like, just hang around, hang around, hang around.
Yeah.
Make sure our goalie makes some big saves and keeps us in the game. And obviously, Carey Price was fantastic on Saturday night. And then when you have an opportunity to strike, when that window opens up just a little bit, you got to make sure you capitalize.
And you knew they were going to. You were just
Exactly.
waiting for them to score.
And that's the one fear that I still sort of have with this Leafs team, is that when they aren't capitalizing on their scoring chances, and, going to that third game, the 2-1 game, Sheldon Keefe, it's like I said earlier in the show, he mentioned after the game, he said, we could have blown the game wide open in the first period.
Yeah.
They had like 4 or 5 grade A scoring chances, and Carey Price stood on his head, and that saved the game for Montreal, because if the Leafs score, even 1 or 2 more goals than that first, it's probably over. But you leave that Habs team in, and that's a team that loves to just grind it out, wait for their opportunities. We know that they aren't as talented offensively as the Leafs. They're not able to consistently generate offense like the Leafs can. And, shout out to the Habs for sticking with it and pulling out a victory in the third period. And I guess now, Lepore, we can actually get into that 2-1 game and talk a little bit more about it. Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing from a Leafs perspective how, like I mentioned, they could have blown the game wide open. They didn't capitalize on their scoring chances. And then, just like that in the third period, the Habs wake up and an amazing play by Brendan Gallagher on the game winner. So what were your thoughts on closing out the week with a loss? It was their first regulation loss since January 20th, but what were your thoughts on that game, Lepore?
Well, let's face it right now. We're spoiled Leafs fans right now. You mentioned already that they're top of the division, near the top of the league. But I am disappointed in these 2 games, the performance in these 2 games, and specifically the game last night, because the big boys didn't show up. I look at the game last night specifically, and you mentioned the scoring chances that came early. So they get the early goal, the Matthew Steele pass in front to Marner. Then there was the 2-on-1 that Marner fed Matthews, and I would have bet my house it was going in. The left side of the net opened up for him, and in my head I was like, goal. And then he fired it high and wide, and he did the eye roll. He couldn't believe he missed it. And then Matthews had another chance where Price stayed big and made a great save. And then there was the other flurry where Kerfoot hit the post right in front of the net, and then Nylander missed the wide open chance. And then it seemed like that was it. Like the door was shut in the way of big scoring chances after that. And kind of what I touched on earlier, in the way that if one of those goes in, now maybe you're forcing Montreal into that track meet, because they're down 2 now. Down 1, they can kind of hang around and wait for an opportunity. But no, down 2, you have to open up the game. You need flow. You need to create scoring chances. But all in all, just disappointed. And there's two reasons why I'm disappointed. Number one, the Stars didn't show up. Like I said, Matthews and Marner, well, I say the Stars, I mean, Matthews and Marner are carrying this team right now. They're everywhere. We can count on them. But Nylander's got to be better. Tavares has got to be better. I think from an offensive standpoint, Riley's got to be better. And I'm sure a lot of people would respond to me and say, oh, well, look at their points. I don't care about points. I mean, you're on this team that was firing on all cylinders on the power play. You're going to get junk points. I want to see dominant play. I want to see the creation of scoring chances. And we didn't get it. To be honest, JT was a ghost last night. And I mean, someone can come back at me and say, well, everyone's going to have a night off. No, you're the captain. You're playing against the second place team in the division. You're getting paid $11 million a year. We can count on you and we expect you to show up and not be a ghost. And JT was a ghost last night. We can't have that. And we can talk about why Nylander and Tavares aren't necessarily generating what they should generate or what we hope they would generate. But I think that kind of summed up the game in the way that they got those scoring chances early. And then, like Keith said, they were fucking shit after that. Like the second period was a snooze. And then Montreal dominated the third. Like you're watching that game, you're just waiting for them to tie it. And in a game like this, where they could have separated themselves by 7 points and put their foot on the throat of the Montreal Canadiens from a standings point of view, and they had a third period like that sucks. And maybe they're getting cocky. Maybe this is still a young group that needs a kick sometimes to remind them that they're maybe not as good as they think they are. But Montreal showed last night that they're not going anywhere, both in the way in any game and in the standings. Montreal is not going to give up. So I expect more from the team, and specifically more from the Stars in a big game like that. Pretty much sums it up.
No, you said it, Lepore. They could have just put their foot down on the Habs, because coming off that 4-2 win earlier in the week, then the Habs lose to the Oilers. They get shut out 3-0. So the Habs come into that Saturday night game, 2 losses in a row, could have lost 3 in a row heading into their week off, which is kind of bizarre that they have that much time off. But yeah, I mean, that would have been a devastating loss for that team. They scratched Thomas Tatar, their leading scorer from last season, on Saturday night. So that team was coming in and they had a lot to lose in that game, because they could have gone into a tailspin after that. You lose 3 in a row, you lose 2 games to the Leafs, who are leading the division. Then you have a 7-point gap. You go into your week off thinking, holy shit. Like, a week ago, we looked like we were on top of the world. And now, we might be struggling just to stay in the top 4 in this division. But yeah, you got to hand it to the Habs. That was a great win. And Lepore, you said it. Marner and Matthews are carrying this team right now. And it's disappointing to see Tavares and Nylander on that second line just not generating offense.
Yeah.
And listen, it's like you said, like, yeah, they're still chipping in on the power play and they're picking up points here and there. Like, they're still both right around a point a game. But just looking at some numbers with those two guys. So John Tavares has 1 even strength goal in 15 games.
That's shit.
And has 1 goal in his last 9 games. And then when you look at William Nylander, 2 goals in his last 14 games after he opened the season with 2 goals against Montreal. So those 2 guys have just not been playing well. And you can look at the numbers to say they're not playing well like I just did. But if you watch the games, #watch the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't see them generating a lot of scoring chances. And I know Nylander had 1 or 2 like really solid scoring chances in that first period. You mentioned that he got stoned by Carey Price, and
it came off a turnover even then. Like,
yeah,
whatever,
but it's like when you're watching Matthews and Marner, it's incredible just how they're able to consistently generate chances shift after shift. And I think that line's been incredible. Matthews, Marner, and Zach Hyman, game in and game out, you see how much Sheldon Keefe relies on them. He knows that when they need to get going, when they need a goal, he's throwing those 3 guys on the ice. And you could even see it in the ice time. Matthews and Marner are playing essentially the most minutes they've ever played in their careers. They're being put in every situation. But this team, in order for them to hit their ceiling and be as successful as we think they're going to be this year and compete for a Stanley Cup, you need better production from your captain and William Nylander on that second line. And it's as simple as that. You can't have those guys going into extended slumps like they're in right now. And sure, for the most part, the Leafs have been getting away with it because their power play has been so good, because Anderson's been playing better recently, because Matthews and Marner have been so dominant offensively. But yeah, that's definitely something you want to see moving forward, is you need more production from that second line. You can't just have them, racking up points on the power play. You need something 5-on-5 from those guys.
Yeah.
And Lepore, another thing that I want to get into here, we've already touched on this a little bit, but it's going to be disappointing at this point if the Leafs do not win the Canadian division.
Oh, yeah.
They have 41 games left. Like, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, are you still confident that this team is going to win the division?
Yeah. Like, if I had to bet today, I still think they'll be the team that finishes at the top of the division. But to your point about where Montreal was coming into last night's game, they had lost those games, the whole thing with Tatar, and then you mentioned they have the week off. So had Toronto won last night, they would have been 7 points ahead, and then Montreal would have been sitting at home watching Toronto play Ottawa 3 times. So you expect Toronto to get, even if Toronto got 4 points out of 6 from Ottawa, now you're 11 points behind. That's devastating for Montreal. Like, giddy up, you better fully lock in. But as far as the Canadian division goes, yeah, it's an expectation now, especially with this start and what you've seen other teams do to Ottawa, and Toronto still has a lot of games against Ottawa that I think it's fair we expect them to get wins from. I almost said points, but no, we expect them to get wins. So both on the standpoint of the regular season and the playoffs, I will say it, we're only 15 games in, but I will say it. If this team does not finish in first place in the regular season in the Canadian division, it will be a disappointment. And if this Toronto Maple Leafs team does not find themselves in the third round, I almost said the conference finals, but is it even called it? Is it even called that? I don't know what they're going to call it. The NHL Stanley Cup semifinal. If they do not find themselves there, it's a disappointment. And in some years, I sit back and say, "Oh, it was the goalie that we ran into. We just couldn't get it one past him, or we had amazing advanced stats." No. We are here to win this division this year. This is an opportunity, and the Leafs can't blow it. They cannot blow it. There's a runway to the conference final. Because I said it again, the conference finals. There's a runway to the Stanley Cup semifinals, and I'm jumping ahead talking about the playoffs, but if they don't win the regular season division title and as well as the playoff division title, I'll be disappointed. Do you feel the same way? I know you'll be disappointed, but is it a hard expectation?
No, 100%. I think I would even go as far as saying it would be, okay, I don't want to go that far.
Catastrophic. Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say colossal disaster.
The 18-wheeler into second place.
The 18-wheeler off the cliff, as we all know, in the Brian Burke era. But
you got a new job, Brian. Way to go.
Congrats, Berkey.
Congrats, Berkey. You want to come on our show and talk about it, you're welcome.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Yeah.
But
we have a lot of questions about your time in Toronto, Brian. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, Lepore is ready to grill you, Burke. Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, anytime you want to come on the show, Brian Burke, be our guest. But no, Lepore, I think it would be a disaster because based on what I've seen so far, and for the people that are saying it's early, it's only 15 games in, it is not early.
No,
this is a 56 game sprint. Before the regular season is going to be over.
Yeah, we're halfway there
right now.
Yeah,
more or less exactly what all of these teams are. And based on what I've seen so far, from top to bottom, when you look at offense, when you look at defense and goaltending and talent and depth, the Leafs are the best team in the Canadian division.
Yeah.
They just are. And if they're not able to win this division and at least win one playoff round, if they cannot win a playoff round this year,
heads are rolling.
Heads are absolutely rolling. That would be a colossal disaster.
Yeah. I expect at the end of the day too, I expect them to add. Now we're going off the rails completely. But why wouldn't this team add at the deadline? Like I said, with this opportunity and knowing other teams who do not have the assets of the Toronto Maple Leafs probably won't spend or take chances. Like some organizations are probably looking at this year as a write-off, both in the way of financially, and it's just kind of weird. So why would I roll the dice, both from the standpoint of my lineup and money? The Leafs are the opposite. I mean, we don't lack money, and it's an opportunity for us. So I expect them to make a hard move. So just to add to the pressure of the expectation of being in the third round of the playoffs. Yeah, big time, man.
Yeah, we saw Elliot Friedman tweet about the Leafs, potentially going after a winger and adding to their forward depth. So we'll see what happens with that. But Lepore, you brought up a really good point, because the opportunity is right in front of them. And you just look at the other teams in the actual Atlantic Division, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins, how they're leading their divisions. And it makes me just think about what the Leafs have gone through over the last 3 to 4 years, and how everyone loves to make fun of them, how they can't get out of the first round. But look how good the Atlantic Division is once again. The Tampa Bay Lightning and Boston Bruins are consistently two of the top 5 teams in the NHL. So what the Leafs have had to do over the last number of years is essentially play a conference final caliber matchup in the opening round against a team that has a very good chance to go to the Stanley Cup final. And obviously the Leafs have been on the wrong side of that for the last few years. They failed to get out of the first round, but it just shows you that the opportunity is there. The window is wide open where you're going to get, whether it's Edmonton or Winnipeg or Calgary in the first round.
Yeah, you got to win.
Whether it's the Montreal Canadiens in that second round. These are teams the Leafs should beat. So Lepore, give me your thoughts on just seeing, the Lightning and the Bruins leading their division, and then just thinking about that thinking about the opportunity that the Leafs have right in front of them.
Well, even if you go further down, what would be the Atlantic Division? So you have Tampa and Boston, who we know what they are. They're elite teams. Florida, apparently the Florida Panthers decided to be really good this year. But then even getting lower, okay, the Red Wings are the Red Wings, but is anyone doubting Steve Yzerman in the long term? No. If someone told you in 5 years Yzerman has that team as a contender, nobody will be surprised. Buffalo hasn't been terrible this year, and Ottawa's only going to get better because they can't get worse. So welcome to the jungle, man. It is going to be an absolute battlefield going forward in that division. So the Leafs just have that opportunity this year. It's a rare opportunity. So I already got kind of heated about it in the way that here we are 15 games in and we're talking about that, but it's the truth. It's the truth. And the ownership group, the management staff, and the players and the coaching has to see it. And you hate to put pressure on guys already, but it would be disappointing. It would be a huge disappointment if they don't do well in the playoffs. Well, if first things first, they'll be disappointed if they don't finish the regular season well. And it'll be a further disappointment if they don't do well in the playoffs. And they have to know there's that pressure that things are going to change. Like I've been the first one to, shut people down when they say, oh, they have to trade Marner or Nylander, or they have to move a big piece and do something different. If this team goes out in the first round, there's no to nothing, with the exception of maybe moving Austin Matthews. I would say no. And I would not completely shut down any type of move. Nothing. Even then, man, like let's say this team goes out in the first round. Is Dubas safe? Is Keefe safe?
I think anything's in play at that point.
Yeah, man. Like, and again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's funny, on the Leafs podcast, we're already talking about how this team's going out in the first round and how we should react if they do. But I'm just saying,
leave it to GFP.
Over
that. But no, Lepore. Honestly, those are really important things to think about, because this team cannot afford to go out in the first round. And I honestly, I don't even really think we're jumping the gun here, because I think you ask anyone that's been following the NHL this year, the Leafs have been great. And guess what? The Leafs have been a really good team for the last few seasons. And I know the playoff success hasn't been there, but going back to what I said, how this team is running into Boston in the first round. And if they had gotten through Boston, well, then guess what? Then they got to play Tampa in the second round. So I think you can't just look at, this team, how they've, been losing in the first round, because I think if they were probably in any other division, they probably would have made a deeper playoff run over the last number of years. But at the end of the day, this team has been losing in the first round of the playoffs. And in a season like this against a very weak Canadian division, that absolutely cannot happen. And I've been on the record as saying, do not trade any of the big four forwards. Don't touch Matthews, Marner, Tavares, or Nylander. But Lepore, you bring up a really good point. If they do lose in the first round of the playoffs and things end really poorly this year and the 18-wheeler goes off the cliff, well, guess what? Kyle Dubas, his neck is going to be on the line. And I think he's going to have to consider probably moving one of the big four forwards at that point. Now, do I think it's going to get to that point this season? I don't.
No, we're going to win it all, and we'll be laughing at this episode when we're on Yonge Street during the parade.
In the streets of Toronto, as we all know. The parade route has already been planned. But no, I mean, that's a code red scenario. If that happens, if the Leafs fail that badly, I don't think it's going to get to that point, but it's something you do have to think about because, they say, what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So again, I hope it doesn't get to that point. I don't think it's going to get to that point this season, but those are things that we certainly need to think about moving forward. And saying that, Lepore, we talked about the struggles of Tavares and Nylander so far. Has there been anyone else on this team that's been disappointing you with their play?
Yeah, there are some other players I'm disappointed in, but I just wanted to make one quick note on Tavares. So 15 games played, he's got 5 goals. In an 82 game pace, that's 27 goals. Now, 27 goals in today's National Hockey League is hard to do. That's a good player. And ask most fans around the league if they'd be okay with a guy in their team scoring 27 goals, even if he makes whatever amount of money, they'd be okay with it. But the fact of the matter is, John Tavares is the captain. 2 years ago, he scored 47 goals. No, I'm not going to say we expect 47 goals every year, but we expect more than 27, and he makes $11 million a year. He's got to be better than that. Like 27 goals when you have that kind of list behind you of previous accomplishments, the money, and wearing the C, it's not good enough, man. You got to score more than a pace of 27 in an 82 game season. As far as disappointment goes in the rest of the lineup, one guy that's really jumped out to me, and it's ironic because when we did I think it was our first show where we talked about expectations of certain players and who's got a lot of pressure on them, I pointed to Jimmy Vesey as a guy who I thought would do really well with this Leafs team because I thought maybe he would finally find himself in a happy place in the NHL and that there was no real pressure on him. I was also kind of hoping that he'd end up a line and kind of be that third guy and be put with some talent and could benefit from playing with some talent. But it has not happened. I don't know if you have the stats in front of you, what does he have? Like 2 goals, 1 assist or something in the 15 games. And I use the word ghost to describe how Tavares was last night. Jimmy Vesey's a ghost. And looking forward as to where he's going to end up in the Leafs depth. And when I say depth, I mean off the roster. I think if things keep up, I think he may get there because we look at Nick Petan, who's been making some impact. We look at Boyd, who's like firing around. Like, again, he's not lighting the lamp, but at least you notice him when he's out there. We are going to get Robertson back. Thornton's going to push guys down. So VC, in my eyes, has, I mean, again, what are your expectations for a guy making $1 million? But in terms of my expectation and hopes for a guy at the start of the year compared to where I am now, I am quite disappointed at the production he's put up for the Leafs so far.
No, you said it, man. 3 points in 15 games, 2 goals, and he got off to a decent start because he was playing with Tavares and Nylander.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, he actually at first sort of looked like a pretty solid third guy on that line, right? A guy that you can insert into the top 6. But now, kind of going back to, another thing that we discussed on one of those earlier podcasts is that players like this, you kind of did expect them to shuffle down into the bottom 6. Same with Wayne Simmons and Joe Thornton. And I know that we've seen Wayne Simmons have success on that second line. And I know he's out of the lineup with an injury right now. But at the end of the day, I sort of saw all those guys as bottom six forwards. But man, Jimmy Vesey, for a guy who was so highly sought after coming out of the NCAA, he goes to the New York Rangers, and it was a team that he really wanted to play for, and it just didn't work out there. Then he goes to the Buffalo Sabres. It was a disaster over there. So he's trying to rebuild his stock, and he's trying to get his career back on track. And I'm sure he looked at the Leafs as a perfect spot, because guess what? Like I just mentioned, the first week of the season, he was playing with Tavares and Nylander. And I'm sure he talked with Kyle Dubas and other front office members. And I'm sure they said, listen, Jimmy, we're going to give you an opportunity to play with some of our talented guys. But clearly that has not worked out. And when you watch Jimmy Vesey out there, the foot speed is non-existent. He's not really generating anything offensively.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a guy. And he's going out there and you're not noticing him. And it's disappointing. But again, it's like also going back to what you said. It's like, what do you really expect from a guy who's making, $1 million, less than $1 million?
Yeah, but at least bring energy. Like he's not even bringing that. Like, come on, man.
No, you're right. And that's like, I look at a guy like Ilya Mikheyev, right? And even though his numbers haven't been there, and he finally scored his first goal of the season this past week, but you're seeing the speed and you're seeing the tenacity.
Yeah, you notice
the energy. And this dude's like flying around defenders. And, there are moments out there where you're like, holy shit, Ilya Mikheyev is the fastest guy on the ice. The way that he's just able to blow by defenders on the outside. And obviously the finishing hasn't been there, but you like to see him at least generating those chances. You like to see him flying around the ice and getting in the corners and making things happen. But yeah, with Jimmy Vesey, it just really hasn't been there. And you know what? You're just kind of thinking about other guys who have been disappointing. I mean, he probably sticks out the most. I can't really think of anyone on the defense core who I've been disappointed in. I know early in the season, I wasn't really too sure about Zach Bogosian. There's some turnovers in the first couple of games, but he seems to have settled down.
Yeah, he's turned around. Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking about some of the other guys on the roster, and you brought up a good point about John Tavares, where when you're making, $11 million a year, you're the captain of the Leafs. Is it good that you're scoring at a 27 goal pace? Sure, if you were a $5 or $6 million player, but when you're being paid that sort of money and you're being relied upon to consistently bring it night in and night out, I think the Leafs need more from a guy like John Tavares. And we can get into the whole contract thing and did they screw up? Did they jump the gun acquiring him in free agency? Could they have used that money to disperse throughout the lineup? I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Lepore?
On the overall, like, John Tavares contract? And
let's get into that a little bit.
Well, about the lineup, I'll talk about the lineup first of all. Are all these things kind of webbed together in the way that, okay, so the two higher end players that we're circling as being kind of disappointed in their play are Nylander and Tavares. And then at the same time, we're saying that Marner and Matthews are carrying this team. But then you see, okay, well, who's playing with Marner and Matthews? Zach Hyman. Who's been put with Nylander and Tavares? Like you said, it was Vesey early on. Then we've seen Mikheyev, who's struggled offensively. So should we let Nylander and Tavares slightly off the hook when we evaluate who has been that third guy they're playing with? In the way that, give them a better player to play with, their numbers would be elevated. And they haven't been terrible. It's that they'd be closer to where their expectations are. And then going even deeper, you have the injuries to Robertson and Thornton. So would that have created a more balanced lineup? Like, again, Thornton was supposed to be on that top line to start. So if you have Thornton, Marner, Matthews, then you have Hyman with Nylander and JT. So then now are we not having that conversation if Hyman's playing with Nylander and JT, because that's now a great line? I mean, that's, again, stuff we can talk about all day, and I'm not prepared to let them off the hook because of what they make and expectations of them regardless. But it's an interesting talking point. with regard to JT, I mean, to sum it all up, no. At the end of the day, when a player like that becomes available, you have to do it. You have to get him, and you can worry about it later. I touched on last week during the Carey Price conversation that we're in a league now where you don't even necessarily evaluate the player. You evaluate his contract and the trades that occur now. You don't trade players, you trade contracts and cap space and that stuff. But unless a team goes completely out of whack with salary or term, when they're picking up a very, very good player, I'm never going to criticize it. And then even then, he's captain. It'd be pretty harsh. It's funny because it'd be pretty harsh for Leafs fans to do this, say 20 years from now, but I wouldn't be surprised either if we look back at a guy who was the captain of the team, who we thought, wow, we shouldn't have even signed that guy in free agency. And then I just thought of Phaneuf, but like that was a trade and a whole different situation and talking point. But with JT, I can't see it getting to that in the way that, I mean, Leafs fans, we all have are kind of players that you just say their name and it's kind of like a joke, or every Leaf fan has that kind of row of shame in their closet of Leafs jerseys with certain last names on the back. Like you have the Clarksons, and I got a few. I have a Gustafson, I have a Bernier. But oh yeah, that's an episode. Lepore's wasted money on players that didn't work out jerseys.
You have a Phaneuf jersey in that closet?
Phaneuf never made it. Fortunately for me, Phaneuf never made it. But I don't think Tavares will get there. That we'll look back and say, wow, I can't believe we like in the next chapter of the Leafs abomination book. I don't think it'll be the acquisition of John Tavares.
And that's fair, Lepore. But saying that, you brought up a really good point in terms of how, you know, players are thought of nowadays, how they're not even thought about in terms of like how talented they are. It's like, what's their contract look like? And then how talented are they? So when you look at the Montreal Canadiens with Carey Price, like we talked about on the last show, it's like, yeah, we think Carey Price is awesome. You know, 7-game playoff series, giddy up. Give me Carey Price between the pipes. But at the end of the day, the dude's making $10.5 million a year, and you're allocating that money to a position that has shown to be very volatile over the last little while. So when I look at a guy like John Tavares, yeah, would I love to have John Tavares on my team? Is he a really good player at both ends of the ice? Yes, he is. But when you're paying John Tavares $11 million, then things start to get a little bit dicey when you're seeing him score 1 goal in 9 games and 1 even strength goal in 15 games. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's feeling the pressure a little bit. I mean, whenever you're the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, naturally, you're just going to feel a ton of pressure. So I'm sure it's eating away at him that he only has 1 even strength goal. Now,
big time.
Are we going to see some positive regression there? Yeah, absolutely. I think we will. I think he's too good of a player to keep going at a pace like that. But also hitting on that other point you brought up, Lepore, about Thornton and Robertson being out of the lineup and how we might be looking a little bit differently at this team at the moment if those guys were healthy, just in terms of how, you know, certain players were slotted in and how certain lines would be looking at the moment. Personally, I don't think Hyman should be taken off that first line. I love how that first line has been operating, you know, since Thornton went down and Hyman was promoted with Matthews and Marner. But no, I mean, thinking about where Thornton's going to slot back in, because it looks like he's going to be back very soon. How do you see Joe Thornton, I guess, slotting back into the lineup now that it looks like that top line is solidified?
Well, perfect timing for that question, Anthony Bruno, because as we're having this discussion, Chris Johnston just tweeted, Joe Thornton is back in a regular practice jersey and is skating alongside Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner at Leafs practice. Suggests he's on the verge of returning to the lineup.
I don't know if I like that before.
So according to Chris Johnson, who's more on the inside than we are, Thornton's coming back and he's playing on the top line. So I just answered your question, and that you were just debunked on the Hyman scenario. But again, like we didn't think early on that Thornton was going to stay on that top line. And I guess even to further the point, okay, so let's say you do have Like, I'm trying to think. Like, so you keep Hyman on that top line. Can you see a Thornton, Tavares, Nylander line? I can't see that. Like
No,
that.
because
That's
I
almost
think
gross. That's gross to me. Like, no, don't do that.
yeah, because just like thinking about like the foot speed of
I was
Tavares,
gonna say,
we know
and
he does
yeah,
so many great things, but speed is not one of his main attributes, right? And you put
yeah.
Thornton on that line,
Even Nylander, like Nylander's not fast. Like he's a beautiful skater. He's got that Swedish stride, but he's not a bullet out
yeah, in
there.
terms of like just straight line speed, right? You don't think of him as like a, you know, a complete burner, I guess, right? But yeah, I mean, I think Nylander's the best skater on that line, but to put two guys with him that just do not move very quickly and mold their game sort of around like being in the right spot, having a good IQ, you know,
Yeah.
always knowing where to be in front of the net. Yeah, I don't like that at all, but I don't
We're
like
both
Thornton.
shaking our head.
But I don't like Thornton being on this first line.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? Like, I'm on the record as earlier in the season saying that the Leafs should have demoted him. And I know we had that conversation, and I guess he wasn't really demoted. He got injured and, you know, it caused the lines to reshuffle. But I just really love the way that first line's been playing.
Yeah.
And you know what? Say what you want about Zach Hyman. He's not going to go out there and score 30 goals, but just look at how dominant Matthews and Marner have looked with him on the wing. And he's not doing anything special. He's going out there, he's doing his job, he's retrieving pucks, he's getting the puck to Matthews and Marner, and they've been awesome the last little while. So it's a little bit of a surprise that Thornton is just coming right back with those guys. So
Yeah.
that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
We talked before about Elliot Friedman circling a piece the Leafs are going to bring in. If I had to guess, I'm not going to guess a name, but the type of player or category of player I would predict is the guy who's going to go on that second line with Nylander and Tavares, or if Hyman goes down there, someone they can put with Matthews and Marner. Because not only does that add to an area where you're already stronger, so if you have your top six of Hyman, Matthews, Marner, JT, Nylander, insert pickup player here, and then now you've pushed Thornton down, Robertson's back, and you look at all the other Leafs players in the arsenal who can be in the bottom six, I think that's huge. That's something that will put this team to another level, because we already think this team has very good depth. So if you add that third piece to one of those top two lines, and then now on the third line, you have like a Thornton, Robertson, Mikheyev line. And let's face it, in today's NHL, because of the cap and how the coaching's better and the pre-game preparation's better, quite often in the playoffs, the top line or even top two lines kind of cancel each other out. It's in the depth, kind of like when Pittsburgh won, how they had Kessel on the third line. Well, even if you take out Sid and Malkin in the top two lines, you're dealing with a 35-plus goal scorer on the third line. Like, that's how you win, because certain teams can't match up with that. So that's what I would predict the Leafs are going to try to do. And again, what Freeman is predicting.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's a good problem to have when you have this much depth, when you have the flexibility to move guys up and down the lineup, where one day they're playing on the third line, and the next day they're on the second line, and then you're moving, you know, a guy from the fourth line to the second line, or a guy from the third line to the first line. I mean, I can go on and on, but the Leafs have so many of these players, especially at the wing, where you can shuffle them up and down the lineup depending on injuries, depending on how certain lines are operating at the moment. So it's a good problem to have. And like you said, Lepore, it seems like at this point, based on the opportunity in front of the Leafs, that they probably will make an addition, especially at forward before the trade deadline. But one other thing I wanted to hit on, Lepore, was actually how this team is playing defensively.
Yeah.
So just to go over a couple of numbers with the Leafs, they are tied for sixth right now in goals against per game, and they're seventh in shots against per game. So this is a team we've seen over the last number of years, which is
we're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I can 100% confirm we are talking
Whoa.
about the Leafs when I bring up those numbers.
We're in
Yeah,
bizarro Jerry land right now.
It's pretty wild to think about because I can't remember the last time the Leafs and again, if you look at their goals per game, they're fourth in the league right now in goals per game. So they're scoring and they're defending well. So Lepore, just kind of give me your thoughts on what you're seeing from this team defensively.
It's impressive. It gives us reason to be happy. Things we were made fun about and made fun of ourselves about. Leafs fans are good at that, making fun of ourselves for the last 2 years. So to see this team, and we're 15 games in now, so it's not a matter of us being 4 or 5 games in, and it's kind of a small sample size. We're getting to a point now where I think we can start to really and truly identify ourselves as a team that doesn't give up a whole lot of shots. Now, I'm not going to go as far to say that this is a great defensive team. I haven't seen enough there. Give me another 20, 30 games to make my assessment on that. And then is it a matter of our competition? Who are we playing? So we'll really get exposed in the playoffs if we haven't really improved. And this is all just a mirage of playing in the division. But at the end of the day, you listed the statistics and numbers are numbers. And I mean, to be at those positions in the way of rankings of shots against a game, goals allowed a game, and then on the flip side, how many goals we're scoring, it's all positive and reason for Leafs fans to be optimistic, because then even too, it's one of those things where even if we had an identical record that we do now, but we were looking at it and it was similar to previous years in the way that, okay, we're 26th in the league in shots allowed a game. We're giving up more shots than 25 other teams. It would still give us that like feeling in our throat of like
here we go again.
Here we go again.
Same old team.
We're winning the track meets, but even the eye test, like you watch these games look and feel different. Like those nerves, and we can circle a lot of things, whether it's the maturing of players like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, growing of age, being better defensively. If it's the emergence of Justin Holl as a regular NHL player and cementing himself as a top 4 defenseman in the National Hockey League, TJ Brody coming in is obviously a big deal, but collectively it looks good from a player standpoint and a coaching standpoint. So right now I believe in it. I'm not fully convinced because I just want to see more. Again, call me the insecure Leafs fan, but applause to both the players and the coaching staff for those current rankings. I mean, how else can we really look at it?
Yeah, so far so good. And you again brought up a really good point where it is meeting the eye test, where you're actually watching these games and you're like, yeah, this team is keeping other teams to the perimeter and isn't allowing them to get to the middle of the ice and have high danger scoring chances and even odd man rushes. And I remember even going back over the last couple of years, I used to see the Leafs all the time when they were on the power play. They'd give up so many shorthanded opportunities the other way. And when you think about all of those things, I think the Leafs have done a really good job neutralizing all that. And they're really not giving their opponents a lot in the offensive zone. And it is really nice to see. And I think it does speak to the depth on the blue line. And we talked about the depth up front, but you look at the blue line, and number one, there aren't any injuries to the blue line right now. You have Mikko Lehtinen and Rasmus Sandin, who are essentially, your 7th and 8th defensemen who are rotating in and out of the lineup.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's a luxury when you have 8 quality NHL defensemen to put in your lineup on a nightly basis. I mean, that's nothing but a good problem to have. So again, it's been great to see, but yes, Lepore, I think we do need a little bit more time, in terms of calling this team a great defensive team. I don't think we can put them in that category yet, especially what we've seen from them over
the 1995 New Jersey Devils. I'm going to say it.
Yeah, exactly. We're definitely not going to put them in that category yet. Grinding out 2-1 wins and 1-0. And God, that's another era of hockey we can talk about. That was boring, but yeah, we're not gonna put the Leafs in that category yet. They're not that stout defensively, but it is great to see. But Lepore, heading into the next week of the season, this is a glorious opportunity if I've ever seen it, because if you're any team in the Canadian division and you are struggling or you're coming off a loss, you look at the schedule. There is nothing, and I mean nothing better to see than the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
And that is what the Leafs have next week. 3 games on home ice against the Ottawa Senators. So what are you expecting as the Leafs come in? They have the best record in the NHL, but they're coming off this loss to the Habs. So what are you expecting to see against the Sens in these 3 games next week?
Okay. Well, I think a lot of Leafs fans are looking at this week and looking at it as kind of, how do I put this? Not as important as, say, these games against Montreal, or because we're battling for the top of a division, or even those games against Edmonton that had a lot of hype because we were finding out who teams were and the whole Draisaitl McDavid thing. But I am looking at this week against Ottawa as maybe the most important week of the season so far. We are playing a team that is at the bottom of not only the division standings, but the NHL standings. This team has been nothing short of embarrassed in many of their games. They're not getting goaltending. They're not getting scoring. Their defensive play is terrible. Like you said, 3 games against this team at home. I want the Toronto Maple Leafs to put their foot down, both in the way of the standings. We mentioned Montreal has that week off. So get those points, force them to panic. And this is a full show me week for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because this team in the past would blow opportunities like this. They would go in there, get a loss, and we'd be fighting for our lives later for positioning because we blew games earlier in the season. These 3 games are an opportunity. And we talked earlier about Nylander and Tavares struggling. Well, now you're playing the Ottawa Senators 3 times in a row. Go get 7 points in 3 games. Light it up. I don't want to minimize these 3 games at all. And I don't want Leafs fans to minimize it. And I really hope the players are not looking at this as a cakewalk, because we have seen the last few games from Ottawa, they've had some improvements. They won last night. They beat Montreal. Was it last week? They've been in some games. They were in some games against Winnipeg that they lost, that they also could have won. I want to see a heck of an effort from the Leafs in these 3 games. And I hate to say I want to see the Leafs embarrass someone, but I want to see the Leafs embarrass the Ottawa Senators in at least one of these games. And I'm hoping, I don't want to put like a points number on it, say, I expect 4 points or 5 points or 6 points, but I better see some dominating play in these 3 games. That's how I see it anyway.
This is your opportunity to separate yourself in the division. And especially with the Habs having their week off, this Senators team is terrible. 3 wins in 16 games, a -30 goal differential. They're a stone disaster. So this is the ultimate get right spot.
Yeah.
If you want to get your confidence up, if you want Nylander and Tavares to start scoring some goals at 5-on-5, if you want, even some of your D-men to start contributing a little bit more offensively, you want to get Morgan Riley going a little bit more, even though he's been solid so far, this is the opportunity against a team like this. You have to absolutely punish a team like this. So
good word, Bruno, punish.
And that's really all there is to it. You cannot afford to lose 2 games to these guys, or even go into overtime in a couple of games. These are games that you need to dominate at 5-on-5 and win in regulation. And will I be extremely disappointed if the Leafs go 2-1? No. I'll be fine with that. But this is a team, based on how poorly they've been playing and based on the talent discrepancy, that the Leafs should be absolutely dominating. So it's going to be a very, very interesting week for the Leafs. We're going to hope to see some great hockey ahead. Lepore, any closing thoughts you had before we wrap this up?
I'm just, like I said, I'm just really looking forward to those 3 games, because I want the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm still in full show me mode, and I want the Leafs to show me who they are. Like, you look at their record, and they're 11-3-1, and you have that fear that they're going to relax. Go 14-3-1. Go in there and win all 3 of those games. Show me that you're dialed in. Show me that you want to win this division. Show me that you want to show off to the rest of the league who the Toronto Maple Leafs are. So far, so good with this season. Let's keep it rolling, man. Let's keep it rolling. don't take this Ottawa Senators team lightly, because again, I'm from Ottawa. I know the Sens take these games against the Leafs very personally, and I expect Ottawa to put up a fight. So don't take them lightly. You're more talented than them. Show us you're more talented. And I'm excited for these 3 games. I really am. And that's what I was kind of referring to earlier, in the way that I'm sure a lot of Leafs fans are kind of brushing these games aside. I am not. This to me is an important week for the season for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Very well said, Lepore. You have those 3 games against the Senators, and if they're able to beat up on them, they're going to have another showdown against the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday night. So it should be a very, very interesting week ahead for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Gluttons for Punishment podcast. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube. I just want to remind you that if you are listening, whether it's on Apple or Spotify, please go on there, give us a 5-star rating, and drop us a review as well. We'd really appreciate that. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, hammer that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you are notified exactly when the GFP podcast is dropping some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.